some survival strategies that living things can have involving predation. Okay. The fact that, we have to eat, we have to not get eaten, puts a lot of pressures on living things, to avoid being lunch, but getting lunch, right? And so everything has every living organism is adapted to survive in its particular environment and adapted to survive perfectly fitting that environment. And what I want to start getting into a little bit is some of the adaptations and strategies living things might, undertake, especially to avoid being eaten. But a lot of times the same strategies work for getting food, right? Okay, so anyway, what we have going here then is predation survival strategies. So a predator's survival depends on their ability to catch prey. So they have to have certain mechanisms and techniques and body type in order to get food. And a prey's survival depends on its ability to avoid getting captured. And so they have to be able to not become somebody else's lunch. All right. And so since the flow of energy through the ecosystem is how life works, this whole predator-prey dynamic is super, super important. I do want to mention, just as human beings living in America, we have largely escaped the food chain, which I think is something that's fairly remarkable. We just go to the grocery store, but our ancestors were part of it, and I think it's worth keeping in mind. And also how sometimes that affects how we got to be the way we are now. But that's another thing. Let's go ahead and stick with this. So go ahead and write it down. If it's right, you got to write. So here's the question here. What types of adaptations could prey have to avoid being captured? And so one of them is called action by prey. Something that the prey animal does in order to avoid getting caught. Run away. Pretty obvious. Jumping up. Like an armadillo, by the way, if a wolf tries to catch it or something, it will jump up in the air to avoid getting grabbed and then run away. It doesn't work so well when it's cars running over it. It kind of works against it because that's another thing. If you ever lived in Texas, it's a problem. Armadillos. Poor things. Anyway, climbing might be an action that they do. Climbing a tree like a squirrel. You've seen squirrels do that. Fighting back. Okay. Bucking, like the bucking bronco thing. But say if a predator gets on its back, they'll buck to knock it off. Spikes might, like porcupines, spike quills will come up. Curling up into a position like an armadillo or a hedgehog or something. There are a lot of different actions they might take in order to prevent themselves from being eaten. And adaptations that help with that would be, for example, being fast, speed, mimicry, camouflage, warning coloration, alluring coloration, which would be something that, like there's a kind of lizard with a blue tail that will tend to be attractive to the prey, but the tail can detach so it can get away. Deceptive markings, action by prey, which was one we just said, size, having a shell, groups, living in herds and things of that sort. There's a lot of different strategies. We're not going to go into a bunch of them, but just a little bit of a taste. One of the things that might be a way that a prey animal will keep from being someone's prey would be size. An elephant, its adaptation, of course, is its big size. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages to being large. I mean, not everything can survive that well being large. Maybe being small might be an adaptation, like a mouse. It's easier to hide. But for the elephant, size is kind of what helps it survive from being eaten by anything else. That's kind of an obvious one. But, size also works sometimes for predators as well as a strategy. For example, the lion is a big cat, right? And it's larger than a lot of other predators and stuff that it competes with, like the hyena. It's smaller than some of its prey, though, like the wildebeest and stuff. The size is important for wildebeest and the rhinoceros and stuff. But size can work both for predators and for prey. Here's another thing. Speed. Being really fast, like a gazelle or a rabbit, to run away. Quick, zoom, right? That's a way to avoid getting eaten. And so that's not a uncommon strategy something might have. And at the same time, speed can also be a predator strategy to be able to be really super fast. Like the cheetah is the fastest of all land animals. Of course, it can only go in short bursts. It doesn't have the endurance, and so you end up with this kind of a well, you might even call it an arms race, but this, the gazelle is super duper duper fast, and the cheetah, the fastest cheetah, are the ones that tended to, get the kills, and they'll survive, right? So over time, generation after generation, the cheetah became faster and faster, and the gazelles, if they were too slow, they got eaten, right? And so the faster they are, the more chance they have to survive and pass that gene to the next generation. So over millions of years, they get faster and faster. And so you have a situation where the gazelles and the cheetah kind of, make each other faster, you might think of it. That dynamic is something we're going to get into in the future. Okay, what's another kind of strategy? I didn't write this one down, but having a shell you can crawl into, that's kind of a nice survival strategy. Or with the hedgehog having spines all over it, makes it kind of a prickly mouthful. And so the body type might be sort of a protective kind of thing. And there's a lot of examples that wouldn't be difficult to think about or think of. But I want to get to some stuff that's a little sometimes more interesting because it's more exotic.